Welcome to this edition of CBN News Sunday. I'm Charlene Aaron. This week, new revelations about Planned Parenthood and a look back at its history. First, to the latest video released this week. It's number 5 in a series bringing to light the horrific harvesting of baby body parts for sale. CBN's Caitlin Burke reports it comes with more disturbing findings about the nation's largest abortion provider.
Like the other videos from the Center for Medical Progress, in this 5th Undercover video, a top Planned Parenthood official is discussing procurement and the cost of fetal tissue. However, this time, the official goes one step further, talking about procuring intact fetuses.
So if we alter our process and we are able to obtain intact fetal cadavers, then we can make it part of the budget that any dissections are this, and splitting the specimens into different shipments is this. I mean, it's all just a matter of line items.
Planned Parenthood continues to defend itself by claiming there's nothing in any of the videos that violate medical or legal standards, accusing the group behind the videos of launching a smear campaign and showing a lack of respect for women. But the release of the Undercover videos prompted several congressional investigations into Planned Parenthood, and calls to defund the agency continue. A move to cut federal funding failed to get enough votes in the Senate on Monday, but the debate is expected to continue when Congress returns from its recess. Republicans seem split over how to move forward, with the idea of cutting funding for Planned Parenthood possibly leading to a government shutdown since Democrats wouldn't agree to it. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he doesn't want to shut the government down, but many Republicans are already vowing to reject any measure that contains money for the abortion provider. Senator John McCain saying, quote, "I don't like a government shutdown, but this is a clear case of totally improper use of taxpayers' dollars. I have an obligation to the taxpayers of Arizona." Planned Parenthood receives well over $500 million a year in government funds. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
And as we mentioned, the Senate failed to pass a bill to defund Planned Parenthood this week. CBN's Pat Robertson spoke with Senator James Lankford, a co-sponsor of the bill, about how that could happen with the information revealed in those videos.
Isn't there some sense of horror in the Democratic Party over what was shown in those videos about how Planned Parenthood is selling body parts? It is so repulsive. Aren't they shocked by it? You must have some colleagues in the Senate who are Democrats.
Privately, they'll say they're horrified by it or they're disturbed by it, but then they'll come back and they just can't admit that that's a life ever. They really determine life based on when they can see that child and when that child is breathing, not when that child is in the womb. And they can't seem to cross the threshold of if it has 10 toes and 10 fingers, its heart is beating, it has a liver and lungs and kidneys and a brain, it has a smile and sucks its thumb. That looks like a baby to me. But they would say, no, it's not a real baby until it comes out of the womb and is actually breathing. And I just absolutely don't get that. What I keep reinforcing over and over again, if Planned Parenthood was harvesting human organs for sale, that means they must have come out of a human child. And so that had to always be a human. And the only difference between that baby in the womb and you and I is time. That's it. And so just because they're younger doesn't mean they're not a human.
Well, you know, the whole deal that Hillary Clinton is saying, but Planned Parenthood has been at the forefront of women's health, which is just a lot of nonsense. But nevertheless, your bill specifically gives funding to community clinics and every other organization that deals with women's health. It just defunds Planned Parenthood. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. We want to be very, very careful with this because there has been the argument that Planned Parenthood is all about women's health. Planned Parenthood is actually the single largest provider of abortion in the entire country. They're the largest abortion provider, but they'll also say we do things like referrals to women's health. Now, they don't actually do the women's health. They refer them to another clinic. We said, why would we have money go to the group that refers? Why don't we actually send it to the actual caretakers? So that is the community health centers. For instance, Planned Parenthood talks about mammograms all the time, that they actually refer people to mammograms, but they don't do any. None of their facilities actually are licensed to do mammograms. They just refer to others. So we've said, why don't we send the money to the place that actually does the mammogram than the actual entity, this clinic, that's just referring, when really they're an abortion clinic more than anything else.
And you can see the full interview with Senator Lankford at cbnnews.com. Joining me now from our Washington bureau is CBN News correspondent Paul Strand, who has covered pro-life issues and Planned Parenthood for years now. Paul, first of all, what's your take on these videos?
Well, they are pretty shocking, aren't they? And right now, Planned Parenthood and its defenders are saying, well, these are very misleading and they only show you one side. And what I have to say is the group that has put these out, of course, they've trimmed them down and they're trying to make a point with them. They can't represent every single thing you see in like 3 hours of video. And sometimes these videos are as long as 3 hours if you go to watch the originals. And it's almost mind-numbingly boring. And of course, there's all sorts of nuances and things that you don't see in these little clips they're putting out. But this pro-life group is trying to say, here is the essence of what we found. Here's the most shocking stuff. So of course, that's what you're going to hear. So I think this defense of saying, well, these are severely edited videos, they don't tell the real truth. I think what they're doing is going right to the very essence of the truth.
Absolutely. Well, what about what happened in the Senate and the failure of the vote to defund Planned Parenthood?
That's sort of interesting. You know, there were enough votes to take away the funding from Planned Parenthood. There were 53 votes, but unfortunately in the Senate, a majority doesn't do it. You have to get 60 votes to say, let's have a debate before we vote. And the Democrats have been a pretty solid block on this thing, and I don't really see a way to move it forward unless either the Republicans who are in charge of the Senate change the rules so that they can get this done with a simple majority, or else what we might see is an actual government shutdown, because the Democrats, I don't think, are going to give this up. To them, this is a basic, we have to have this sort of thing issue with them. But what's going to be interesting is how the mainstream media might put this to the public, which will be, look, there's the Republicans willing to shut the government down to hurt women. So I think that's probably the line you're going to hear in the public. It'll be very interesting in an age of diverse media to see how well that sort of thing plays, the mainstream media as a block against all the various conservative outlets and pro-life outlets, news outlets that there are these days.
Well, I believe that the rules have been changed for other things in the past before, but the state of Florida just revealed an investigation into Planned Parenthood. They're allegedly doing second trimester abortions. Will this help Lankford's bill?
I think everything that gets done is going to help in the Senate. Every bit of publicity they can get. What's interesting is how small an amount of publicity this issue is getting. The mainstream media, again, has almost totally ignored this thing. People are finding it out on the sides, on the edges. And when the mainstream media does cover it, for instance, I heard a very large story on NPR, it's all just covered in this idea that this is misleading, and these groups that are putting these videos out are the most radical, far-right sort of pro-life groups, extremists. They sometimes link them to the folks who've done shootings of abortion doctors, which of course isn't even close to the truth. And so what'll be interesting is, again, what does the public get to hear? But there are all sorts of investigations going on that I think are going to help. For instance, I covered a story with a man in Texas, Life Dynamics, he represents, Mark Crutcher. He's got this thing where he's saying to lawyers all across America, you know, Planned Parenthood all the time is covering up underage girls are coming in here, having been basically, you know, statutory rape has been committed against them, and Planned Parenthood doesn't inform the police. And he's saying to all the trial lawyers of America, go for this, you can make a fortune, and he figures that the abortion industry could be hurt to the tune of $30 or $40 billion. So there's things like that going on that I think as publicity from those comes out, it will definitely help the whole atmosphere in the Senate.
Okay. Paul Strand, thank you so much, and we're going to be back with you in just a little bit. But coming up, a look at the history of Planned Parenthood and how it targeted certain communities for population control. Well, Planned Parenthood has had a startling agenda from its inception, started by a woman whose goal in part was controlling the Black population through abortion and sterilization. Margaret Sanger, with the goal of controlling the Black population and other groups that she thought of the same. Here's a look back at at abortion and the providers, what they've done to minorities.
Abortion is Black genocide. What happens to a mind of a person and the moral fabric of a nation that can accept the aborting of a child without a pang of conscience?
In many Black communities, for every child actually born, 3 others are aborted, more than double the rate among whites. Dr. Clennard Childress, founder of blackgenocide.org, says the consequences of those figures will eventually end up destroying a whole race of Americans.
African Americans here in this country are the only ethnic group in any place on the globe that's not replacing themselves. This is genocide.
Some say abortion is the #1 killer in the black community, leading more and more African American churches to speak out and take a stand for life. Bishop Daniel Robertson of Richmond's Mount Gilead Baptist Church says black pastors have a responsibility to their communities to do more.
We really need to just, make a statement to the community that we believe the Bible, thou shalt not kill.
But Robertson's church does more than just preach against abortion. For one, they encourage their members to consider adopting these unplanned children.
We go to the abortion clinics and ask people, there are other alternatives. We try to educate people and let them know you don't have to do this. And so we do have that ongoing ministry. And then because our doors are open and we preach the message of Jesus Christ, we do try to give people hope.
In his book, No Shepherd's Cry, Childress says the black church can no longer be silent on the issue.
If there's a devouring force that is decimating my community, as a shepherd, I must respond with the truth and deliver the lamb with its young from the wolf and the devourer. And the devourer is the abortion industry.
Dr. Childress points out this should come as no surprise, considering that black Americans were long ago targets of the abortion industry. In the early 20th century, Margaret Sanger founded Planned Parenthood, an organization that later became the nation's largest abortion provider. Sanger encouraged abortion and sterilization to limit the size of black families. Childress says she also used the unaware black minister to further her agenda.
Margaret Sanger, a devout racist, a eugenics, and the author of the Negro Project, knew that the colored minister was going to be pivotal in getting her program across.
Because of that, both Robertson and Childress believe black clergy must take the lead in fighting against abortion.
The colored minister, the Negro minister, the African American minister is pivotal right now in addressing the abortion issue because we have been silent due to political ties and due to some misinformation.
But Robertson says the issue isn't just with the black church, but with the faith community as a whole.
There are a lot of pastors, whether they're black or white, they're just comfortable. They don't want to stir up anything. You can't just stay behind the stained glass windows of your sanctuary, but you really do have to reach out into the community and make a difference.
And Paul Strand is back with me from our Washington bureau. Paul, this story isn't new information for you. What else can you add? Did Sanger target others as well?
Yeah, she didn't just target black people. She also targeted, for instance, Southern Europeans, the darker Europeans. They were flooding into America, and she was saying maybe we have to keep their numbers down. Well, not maybe. She thought their numbers should be kept down. And I haven't seen the direct sources on this, but I think she even had a problem with fundamentalist Christians. So she was all for eugenics. And, the Nazis used her stuff to fashion their programs. And also, she talked to the KKK. She was at one of their rallies and was rousingly cheered. So this woman is sort of a nightmare for people who are defending Planned Parenthood. They really don't want you to know much about Margaret Sanger's past.
Indeed. Well, do you think most people know the history of Planned Parenthood, especially right now, lawmakers who are debating whether the government should use our tax dollars to defund it?
Not only do most people not know the history at all, they don't even know what Planned Parenthood is doing today. This fact that they do more abortions than anybody else in America. In fact, if Planned Parenthood was a country, it would have the 6th highest rate of abortions in the entire world. Most Americans don't know that Planned Parenthood does abortion. So that's the problem here, this absolute lack of knowledge. Most people just think that they're giving women like reproductive health advice and contraceptives, things like that. And what's interesting, there's so many places, 10 times more the number of clinics that are doing these things than Planned Parenthood. If Planned Parenthood disappeared tomorrow, women's health, reproductive health, would be totally taken care of, except for maybe this question of abortions.
Now, you talk to a lot of pro-lifers. What are you hearing from them about all of this?
Well, I think that they are they're somewhat hopeful, but what's interesting to me is this solid wall of opposition as this defunding of Planned Parenthood comes up. And I kind of want to talk about that philosophy, why this is, because you would think as evidence piles up, people would be going, maybe I need to change my mind on this. But I think what we're seeing is that as the conscience has been seared over the decades, people have to prevent cognitive dissonance in the brain, they have to say, well, I'm right about this because maybe this isn't really a life, or this is different than the life of people after they're born, out of the womb. So I think what you're seeing is people trying, they have to stay opposed to it, because what happens in their own minds, what happens in their own hearts if they say, you know, this is not really, this is a baby, this is indeed a life, this is someone just like me, this is just like my children. So I think that's why you're seeing such a solid wall of opposition, and I think that's going to be an intensely hard thing to crack. So watch for that. Watch to just see how does this wall of solid pro-choice opposition get even firmer as more and more of these videos come out. Where you would think it would crack the wall, instead I bet the wall gets higher and higher.
It's amazing that some people have actually said, if this doesn't move the country to defund Planned Parenthood, what would? So stick around, Paul. We're going to be back with you in just a little bit. But up next, a social media campaign by Planned Parenthood backfires. Planned Parenthood centers and supporters across the country took to Facebook and Twitter, encouraging women to share how Planned Parenthood has helped them using the hashtag #PPShoutYour shout out your story. But it didn't go as expected, and pro-lifers and thousands of women who were traumatized by their experiences took over with messages like these. Hey, Planned Parenthood, I was born alive in one of your clinics, burned in my mother's womb for 18 hours. I had an abortion at 16 and regret it every day. I wish I had a 37-year-old and grandkids instead of regret. I'm married 23 years, 2 lovely kiddos, and a successful new business, no child sacrificed. Actually, women do excel without it costing the lives of their babies. That's my story. Another woman begins her story on Facebook with, "Let me disclose my shame." It's too long for us to share now, but you can go to cbnnews.com and read the full story in the article, Pro-Lifers Take Over Planned Parenthood's PP Shout Your Story. And Paul Strand is back with us from Washington. Paul, I'm sure you're not surprised by the stories that these women are sharing, but you were surprised at how this campaign backfired on Planned Parenthood.
Yes, what's interesting is, well, you know, I think Planned Parenthood maybe should have seen this, because who is proud of their abortion and wants to shout out about it? Who wants to talk about it? But on the other side, people who suffered psychological damage from this, emotional damage that goes on for decades, they want to talk about it. They want to warn other women. So in a way, maybe Planned Parenthood should have seen what was going to happen here. And one of those ladies who wrote in, Georgette Forney, she's one of the top officials in a group called Silent No More. They've organized thousands of women who've had abortions and done this campaign where they're constantly trying to get the word out to people. Look, this will really harm you much more than you think. What's interesting is just a few years ago, Planned Parenthood, one of the main ways they've come up a solution to this is that they're asking clergy side with us, and they send